Did you know that daisy flowers symbolize growth, cheerfulness, and friendship? In case you're making a handmade card and sending it to your loved ones, you can never go wrong with adding daisies to your project. Today, we're compiling not 2, not 3, but 12 amazing video tutorials featuring daisy flowers, perfect for any occasion. Let's get started. One thing you can expect when it comes to die-cut daisies is that you can always elevate them with metallic details. Check out BB Cameron's tutorial here to learn how to do it.
Hello there, this is BB Cameron, and today I'm passing by to share super easy card making ideas using some of the newest Altenew supplies. More than texture, we are going to be adding incredible shine to one project using one of the new release paste colors. I have 6 of the new 7 colors. So here we have silver, brass, Mayan gold, sea beryl, galactic skies, and amethyst. So we have 14 shades. I'm missing one, so you can see only 13 shades there. So we have a good variety of metallic shades. We have 4 different and gorgeous gold metallic colors, and these are shades that are difficult to achieve just by blending colors. And we also have different shades of silver, and now we also have some color paste like the blue, pink, and purple. And we also have a paste that is almost black, and in my opinion is one of the most beautiful ones. I'm obsessed with golden colors, so we have here brush pirate, brass, enchanted gold, and Mayan gold. You can see the different colors through the container. That's exactly the same color of the paste. So today I'm going to be using only brass to create the die-cut florals in this card, the background, and also the little sentiment banner. So we are going to start by applying with a palette knife the paste over white or black cardstock, and we are going to allow this to dry overnight. Compared with the Mayan gold here, those are 2 completely different universes. But all of these pastes provide this beautiful, smooth, and shiny look and feel when they dry over paper, and they don't crack. So these are great for die cutting. Today I'm also going to be using the Daisy spray layering die set to die cut some of this paper, and I didn't encounter any problem. The only advice I will give you, maybe if you need it, and if you are using a small dies, is to add a layer of press and seal at the back of the paper so the die cuts will stay stuck to the paper like that. But I didn't have any press and seal there, okay? I just wanted to give you that extra idea because I shared a similar video on Instagram and people were asking me that, and I said no, I didn't need any press and seal, just in case they give me that idea, you know. So I die cut all the pieces, even these tiny micro pieces here, out of that paper. And I also die cut a piece of olive cardstock because I want a contrasting element. I didn't want all my elements to be metallic here, especially for the topper, because I'm also going to add relief paste to the background. So this is going to be very, very shiny. So as you know, this type of die cut has also a keyhole system that allows you to identify the different pieces you need to lay out. But I'm going to ignore the number. I'm just going to adhere them one on top of the other one, and then I'm going to add a contrasting center as well, made using gorgeous Mayan gold die cuts and also sea battle details. That gives the flower a lot of interest and value. So there you go, and please remember that this doesn't have to be perfect. The more patchy and messy, sometimes these kind of projects looks a lot better. I have another flowers here made using the other paper that I painted with the paste, and those were used to make this project here. Super simple and easy to make, and it adds all that shine and all that value just by using the paste to color paper and then die cut it. Okay, so now we have to complete our floral cluster. And this is so super clever that they also added the keyhole system to the stem, so you know exactly where to attach each flower. You can do it as you please, and of course that's the way I will do it, but I follow the rules here. And if you see there, just by placing this on white cardstock, it looks stunning. But I wanted to go a little bit further, and I added a little bit of ink just to add more contrast and interest. Now I'm going to use Lattice Blossom Stencil. This is 1 layer stencil, and we are going to create a very shiny background for this card as well, using the same color of paste. As you see there, I haven't removed the seal of the jar or the container. This is to keep my paste moisture. Now I started by adding very little paste to my craft knife, and I was applying it slowly. I speed the camera because it took me 1 minute 30 to apply the paste. I don't have to keep you here for that long. Then I reapply a little bit more. I'm very tight with the amount of paste I use or I put on my palette knife because I don't like to waste it at all. These are not cheap supplies, they are high quality, and it's not fair to waste them. So you can use any excess of the paste to color a piece of cardstock that you can die cut later. Now look at this gorgeousness. I think this is what the paste has been done for, stenciling. It looks gorgeous before drying, and this is after drying only 30 minutes. Absolutely stunning. This brass color got my heart. And see the brass flowers on top of it is the perfect coordination. So these are plenty ideas for you to do different things with your craft supplies. Now I'm going to add dimensional foam pads behind the flowers. I don't want a lot of dimension, I want very little. And you can place this arrangement from one side so that you can trim one part of the panel and make a smaller card, or you can also use this over all the panel. You are the boss, and yes, you can add more flowers if you want to, or another floral cluster. I hear you just saying there, oh, I can do that. Yes, of course you can do that. You can also create flowers in different colors and make different things here. But I'm going to keep it simple for you, and I'm just going to add a little glue behind the stems of the flowers. I apply very little glue, and ideally I'm going to allow the glue to dry a little bit before placing this over my panel. I'm not pressing down anything, as you see there, to avoid glue smearing, and the foam pads are going to keep the whole thing in place while the glue dries. Now I'm going to create the sentiment, and for that I'm going to be using a piece of this color cardstock using the paste, and I was very unsure on what to do here. I first wanted to create a little tag, but I didn't know if I wanted to do only the letters. These are die cut tiny letters, or the letters with the negative space or die cut, or just the negative space, as you see there. I have 3 options there. So I was exploring options, and I just knew that I didn't want a big die cut sentiment or a big stamped sentiment. I wanted something small. And then I also made the decision to trim this panel to create a C6 or a standard A2 card base. So this measure 5.5 inches by 4.25. You can use this little piece for something else. It's still very beautiful. So you can use that piece if you want to. So finally, I create this tiny mini tag just using scissors, and I added twine, and I was thinking, okay, where I can place this. That was the place that I decided to go for. I applied a dimensional foam pad at the back of this tiny tag, and I just placed it there. Once this was done, I tied a bow. I glued this into a card base, and this card was done. Let me know in the comments, what do you think about these release paste die cuts? Is this something you would like to try? If so, which are your favorite colors?
Not sure what colors to use for your stenciled daisies? Mindy's got you covered with a super fun and informative tutorial on using primary colors with your designs.
The set that I'm going to be using today is the Build a Garden Oxide Daisy set. So this does have a stamp set, it has a coordinating die, and it also has a stencil. And I will be using all three of these products today. And one of the first things that I always do when I get my stencils is I go through them and make sure that they are in order. This one, I believe, is a 5-piece stencil, and the numbers are always etched kind of somewhere on the stencil to let you know what order they are in. I'll be using my Stamp Wheel 2.0 to do my stamping, and I want to create two bouquets on the front of my card. So I'm making sure to place my cardstock down in the bottom left-hand corner, and I'm going to place my bouquet down in that bottom corner because I want to stamp this twice on the same cardstock. Now, because I haven't used this stamp set yet before, I am taking my eraser. This is from Altenew, and I'm just going over it with that eraser to help condition the stamp. And then I'm going to clean it with a chamois and then dry it with my hand so that way we don't get any water spots on our card. By conditioning your stamp, it is going to take ink a lot better. Then I'm going to take some limestone ink. So any type of light colored ink will work for this. This is my preferred stamping technique when it comes to layering stencils. I'm going to ink this up really well in that limestone ink and stamp this down. What I like to do is stamp my image first in a light colored ink. And then after I'm done ink blending, I will put my cardstock back in the same position and stamp over the top with a black ink. So now that I have that stamped down, I'm going to flip my cardstock so that I can stamp this one more time. So again, I'm just going to ink up the image with that light colored ink and stamp this down onto my cardstock. And I am not going to trim my cardstock in half. I'm going to leave my cardstock as this whole piece and just do all of my ink blending as is. A lot of times it's easier to work with a smaller area when it comes to the ink blending, but because I want to stamp these images again in black ink, I'm just going to leave my cardstock as the full sheet. Then I'm going to just flip my top plate over so my stamp is facing up, and I'm going to set that off on the side. Now I'm going to take my cardstock and place it down onto my sticky mat. This one happens to be from the original stamp wheel because I can't find my 9x12 sticky mat. Otherwise, I would be using that. But this is still going to work because the sticky mat is going to hold my cardstock in place and also my stencil. So this is the first layer of the stencil, and I am just masking off certain areas right now on the stencil. I'm going to come back to those a little later. Now I'm going to start with the lightest color out of the Red Sunset collection. So this happens to be blush, and I am using a small blending brush to just lightly place down some color. That's kind of my starting point. I always place down a light color first and I have it kind of fade off into the white at the edge of the petals. Next, I'm going to come in with a shade darker, except I think I jumped a step in the Red Sunset collection. This happens to be crimson, and I'm starting in the center. And then as I get out, maybe about halfway, I'll have that fade off a little bit. Now I'll remove the stencil and I'm going to lift up my cardstock, flip it over, and I'm going to go ahead and do the other one right away. One thing I do want to point out is I am cleaning my stencil before I even do that same technique on this second piece or this second image because I really want to start out with the light color again, like I did before. If I hadn't cleaned the stencil, that dark ink would have been on top, and I really wanted to start with that light color first and then be able to come in with that darker shade. Then for the rest of the video, I'm not going to show me doing the stenciling for both bouquets. I'm just going to show the one, but I will be using the same technique on both bouquets and also cleaning the stencil in between. So this is layer two. It's going to fill in the rest of the petals. And again, I started out with that blush and then coming in with the crimson using a mini blending brush to really kind of be able to focus in on those certain areas. Now, there is one part in here that I think I kind of oopsed with. I think I did these areas of the stencil a little too soon. I think these are meant to be done later, but it's still going to work out really well. I just had repeated those same steps of doing the blush ink first, coming in a little bit with the crimson, and then even a little bit more using the velvet, which is the darkest color out of the Red Sunset collection. And for that, I used a micro blending brush. Now, again, I think I did that stencil with these smaller areas just a little bit too soon, but it's still going to look great. Now I'm going to come in with the next layer of the stencil for the petals, and this one is going to add some detail to our petals. Now, to start with this, I am going to start with the crimson ink, which is actually the color that I left off on. And I am going to approach this in a similar way that I did the other layers. So with the crimson, I'm starting in the center. And as I get out towards the edge of the petals, I am going to not press as hard, so it's going to be a little bit lighter. Then I'm going to come in with the micro blending brush. And this time I'm going to be using velvet. So again, starting in the center, because that's usually where the darkest area of the flower is going to be, and then blending out towards the ends. So right now it might not look like much, but once we stamp the detail back over the top, it's really going to enhance that design. Now I'm going to work on the center of the flowers. And for this, I am using lemon ice to start with. I know it looks bright green on screen, but it is a really, really light and kind of a bright yellow. So I am going over the centers. I did also go over the leaves because I kind of forgot for a moment that I wanted to do blue leaves. So I did do the edges, but that actually turns out really neat. So wait for that. Now, before I removed the stencil, I am coming in. I think I used lemonade stand to add a little bit of highlight or darker area, I should say, shadow area to the center of the flowers. Now, to work on the leaves, I am going to be using the Marine Life collection. And I believe I skipped over the first color, which is the lightest. I think I skipped over the blueberry because it was so light. And I started out with Blue Horizon, kind of starting where the leaves are all meeting at the stem and blending out towards the edge. And then came in a little bit with Ride the Wave. And then notice as I got towards the ends of the tips where I had that yellow, it started to turn this really unique green color. Now, I'm going back to one of my previous layers of the stencil. I think this was stencil number one, and it had these additional elements on there. So I masked off the areas above it so I don't get blue into my red flowers and just filled that in with those same colors of blue. Now, our next stencil is adding the detail to our leaves and our centers. So for that, I am using raw amber and I'm going over that with my mini blending tool. I'm going to wipe off the excess ink and then place some post-it tape over the top just in case I get carried away with my blue. And I'm coming in, I believe this was the Ride the Wave. And then I'll come in with a micro blending brush with navy. And these blues really do pack a serious punch. This is a color combination for flowers that I don't think I have ever done before, so it was a unique experience for me, and I was really happy with the results. Now, once my blending is done, I'm placing my cardstock back into my stamp wheel 2.0, making sure it's tucked down in that bottom corner. And then I'm going to ink up the image with the obsidian ink. Now, you can maybe take a transparency and place it over the top if you want to test stamp it to make sure it is lined up correctly. But I was pretty confident, so I just went ahead and stamped it down, and the reveal is breathtaking in my opinion. I was really, really happy with the results. Now, I did notice that I had a smudge on there, but I was pretty sure I'd be able to get rid of that or cover it up once I start arranging my bouquets on my card front. But the red and blue, because we are using the primary colors with red, yellow, and blue, that is one of the reasons that it is such a striking design and color combination. For the background, I am using a piece of cardstock cut to 4 by 6 because I decided in order to fit everything on the front of my card, I needed to turn it into a 5 by 7. And I like to have a white border. So I started out with a piece that is 4 by 6. And I'm using the blueberry ink starting in one corner and kind of having it fade off into white, getting towards the top corner. I already had kind of pre designed it a little bit. So I had an idea how my bouquet was going to look and knew that my sentiment would go in that top left hand corner, which is why I'm leaving that kind of free of ink. I had also come in with just a smidge of the blue horizon down in the bottom right hand corner. And now I am placing the luminous diamonds stencil over the top and just briefly dusting over it to give it a little bit of texture in the background. I die cut out both of the bouquets with the coordinating die, place them in a splat box, and I'm splattering on some titanium gouache using a little bit of water and a paintbrush. I'm also going to add a small amount of splatters to the background. I did already stamp a sentiment off screen using that same stamp set and cut it out with the coordinating die, so I do have that ready. And now for my panel, I am gluing down one of the bouquets kind of off on that right-hand side, just using some liquid glue. And then the other one that's going to be over the top of it or overlapping it, I added a little bit of the foam tape and then the rest using liquid glue. So whatever part of my flowers are overlapping my previous bouquet is where I'm adding the liquid glue. Then I'll also go ahead and add my sentiment up towards the top. And I know that I have some leaves overhanging. So once everything is glued down, I'm going to flip it over and trim off any excess. But those come in handy because I did feel like I had kind of an open spot down in the bottom corner. So I'm going to save those and rearrange them down in that corner to help fill in that space a little bit. So once I had all of my edges cleaned up by trimming off the rest of the excess, I am going to add some foam tape to the back of this panel and I'm going to attach it to a 5x7 card front. This is going to leave me a really nice white border around the edge and it's also going to help kind of frame my design. So while these flowers might not be realistic, you may not see blue leaves in the wild. It is a stunning color combination because we used primary colors that look good together. And it just makes a striking and eye-catching card to send to somebody.
You think your die cuts are looking a little plain? Check out this fun tutorial from Michelle as she shares ink blending secrets to make your daisies stand out.
I've started off by die cutting the layers from the Crafter Flower African Daisy layering die set. This is such a pretty set. There are 3 layers to each of the flowers. I'm actually just using 2 of the flowers, but there are also some flower centers, some stems and leaves as well, but I'm not using all of them today. I've die cut them from Classic Crest £110 solar white cardstock, and I'm using the sticky mat inside of the stamp wheel base, and I'm going to use that so that I can kind of stick the die cuts on and they're going to hold them in place while I do my ink blending. So I've just placed all of those on the sticky mat. And then I can add some colour on top, and I'm using mini ink blending brushes, and I'm starting off with my lightest shade of pink from the Cherry Blossom Crisp dyeing collection, and this is Pinkalicious, and I'm just adding this colour towards the outside edges of these petals. You're not actually going to end up seeing a huge amount of this colour because I'm adding lots of layers onto these die cuts of the inks, but I wanted to have a base layer so that if I didn't end up having lots of kind of pink towards the outside edges of these petals, you are still going to have some colour. So it's not going to be completely white if I don't manage to add any more kind of pink to these edges, if that makes sense. So I'm going around all of these kind of edges of these petals with the Pinkalicious colour. And as you can see, I'm not being careful at all on how I'm doing the ink blending, and you'll see why a little bit later. I thought that I was going to go in with my darkest shade of purple, and I ended up going in with my lightest first. And this is Deep Iris from the Shades of Purple Crisp dyeing collection. And I'm adding that towards the centre of these petals. Again, I'm not being precise on how I'm actually doing the ink blending, and these 2 layers are actually going to help me with the ink blending itself. I'm going to get a much more kind of blended look between the 2 shades because I'm adding in these base layers. So I'm kind of finishing off here with this Deep Iris colour, and it looks so messy at the moment, but it is going to get better, I promise. I'm then going to go in with the Rubellite, which is my darkest shade of pink, and I'm basically going to pretty much go over where I've added that purple in. And when I add this in, it's going to blend the purple and the pink together. But again, I don't necessarily have to be too precise with the ink blending. Ordinarily, I do take my time with ink blending, trying to sort of get the transitions nice and blended together. But I found doing this kind of method of adding in base layers first means that I actually don't have to take too much time on it, and although I'm adding more layers, so that is taking the time, I'm not actually taking the time to do the ink blending itself, if that makes sense. So these came together really quite quickly. So I'm adding in that rubellite here, and you can see that as I'm adding it in, it's just blending those colours together, but I am losing a lot of the purple. So I'm going to go back in with the purple and add that in afterwards. These layers here on the left hand side are going to pretty much get mainly covered up by the layers on the right hand side. So those ones in particular, I'm definitely not worrying too much about the ink blending. So I'm now going in with Midnight Violet, and I'm adding that just towards the centre of these petals. And again, I'm not having to do too much sort of ink blending because I've got that really dark saturation of colour in the centre already. So I can just add this colour into the centres, and I think that that looks really nice, having the purple in the centre and then the pink on the outside edges. I am taking my inspiration for these colours from the June 2023 Inspiration Challenge. Deepa took a beautiful photo of some flowers, and there was some kind of like really vibrant purples, some vibrant pinks, and then also some white flowers. But instead of doing them separately and having like a purple flower and a pink flower, I thought I would combine them on the same flowers, and I think it looks really nice how it turned out. Because the sticky mat is photopolymer, the colours are going to stain this mat. I am using some stamp cleaner here just to get off any residual ink that's actually on the surface, but it is going to stain it a little bit. Now, personally, I don't like this, I'm not going to lie. I'm just that kind of person. I prefer to have things pristine clean, even though it does no harm to it whatsoever. So what I've decided to do is, because the sticky mats are now sold separately, I'm going to have one that I'm going to use for this purpose, like ink blending, because it's such a great way to be able to do ink blending. As you can see, pretty much the die cuts do stay in place. And then I'm going to have one that is pristine clean that I'm going to keep clean, and that's how I'm going to do it. So for these leaves, I'm using some vibrant greens. This is the Green Valley Crisp Dye Ink collection, and I'm using Firefly, Grassfield and Shadow Creek. And although this leaf here is moving a little bit because there's not a huge amount of surface area to kind of keep that in place, it was still much better than me adding adhesive or anything like that and sort of having to keep those in place. I then want to add a little bit of ink blending onto a scrap piece of white cardstock here that I'm going to use for my sentiment. So I'm using the same pinks that I used before from the Cherry Blossom collection, and I'm adding it a little bit darker towards one side of this piece of cardstock, just to get kind of like a little bit of an ombre look. I'm now going to adhere the petal layers together, so I'm using a bit of liquid glue in the centre of these petal pieces. And then I can adhere the layers one on top of each other. These layers are pretty solid, if that makes sense, so I can add a lot of adhesive if I wanted to onto the back of these layers, because they're not actually going to kind of overlap each other. But I wanted to have the edges of the petals not have any adhesive on them, so that I can kind of lift them up a little bit, and it's going to give a little bit of interest and dimension onto these flowers. You could definitely add the layers with foam tape. I think that that would work really nicely as well, but I like just having the centres of the flowers sort of stuck well together, and then having the outside edges of these petals sort of lift up a little bit. These flowers are pretty self-explanatory on how to actually adhere them together, but it has got the sort of layers on the back of the packaging, so you can see how they layer up together. So now I'm going to take my fingers and just kind of manipulate those petals a little bit to kind of lift them up. The glue isn't completely dry at this point, so you can see as I'm sort of moving these layers, you can see a little bit of the glue in between, but that's absolutely fine. There's enough glue sort of in the centre of these flowers to hold them together. I've then taken the tags and labels the labels and tags to die set, and I've cut 2 tags using that set, and I've used that really beautiful shape. It's a really pretty shape. What is great about this set is that the holes of the tag are separate dies, so that if you didn't actually want to create them as tags, you could just use them as labels on a card base. You can do that, which is really quite helpful. But obviously I'm creating a tag today, so I did cut that hole in. I've cut 2 of the tags and I'm adhering them back to back. This is going to make it so that the back is nice and clean, and also give a little bit of stability to the tag as well. And then I'm just popping that hole reinforcer at the top. I can bring in my flowers, and I'm just kind of sort of seeing where I want them to be placed before I adhere anything down. I'm then going to take the leaves, and I decided to cut the bottoms of the leaves off, kind of like that sort of stem piece. And then I'm going to add some tape runner onto the back of these. I'm just again adding it towards the bottom of these leaves. Although these aren't going to lift up and they're also not really going to overlap the tag too much, I found that I didn't sort of want to have too much adhesive at the top, so if they kind of flipped up a little bit, it was okay, because it just adds a little bit of dimension onto the tag. So I can just pop that leaf there at the bottom. A lot of that leaf is going to get covered up, but I just wanted to have a little bit more greenery there at the bottom. I can then take some instant dimension foam tape and add that onto the back of the flowers. So I can just pop this flower here in place, and I'm using tweezers just to help me out with the placement. And then I can pop some more foam tape onto the back of this flower, and I didn't add any on the left hand side because it is going to overlap the other flower slightly. So once I'm happy with the placement, I can press them down. I'm then taking the Wild Geranium die set. This die set coordinates with the stamp set in that you can use the shadow piece to cut out the stamped word if you wanted to, or you can just use the die set on its own, which is what I'm doing today. And I'm taking that little piece of cardstock that I added the ink blending to, and I've die cut that with the hello word. I'm then going to add these little letters onto the shadow piece. And I'm not going to lie, this was a little bit fiddly. They are really quite small in size, but I think it worked quite nicely for the tag. So I'm adding a little bit of liquid glue onto the back of the letters. And then I can pop them down onto that shadow piece. And then I can just finish up with the O here at the end. I've then added some more instant dimension foam tape onto the back of the sentiment, and then I can pop that down onto the tag. And then I thought, for something a little bit different, I thought that I would add enamel dots into the centres of the flowers rather than using the die cut layers. And that is the tag finished for today. Really clean and simple, but I love that dimension. You can see how much dimension you can get from these flowers.
Jenny's video helps you elevate your outline daisy stamps and turns it into a gorgeous, elegant, metallic masterpiece. Learn how to do it here.
Hi guys, it's Jenny, and today's product focus is the Paint a Flower African Daisy. Because this was just released as part of the monthly subscription for Paint a Flower, I wanted to give you a close-up look at it. As with all the other Paint a Flowers, it features a beautiful floral outline image, along with a number of coordinating scripty sentiments and some bold sentiments that you can pull together to create your full sentiment for your card. Now, I often like to watercolor or no-line watercolor or alcohol ink marker or pencil color in my Paint a Flowers. But sometimes there's not always time for that, or you may not be in a colouring mood. So I'm going to show you how you can use your outline stamps, particularly those detailed ones you get in Painter Flowers, with heat embossing and ink blending to give a really deep, bold look. It's a technique I've used quite a lot of times before on other cards, and people always give me more comments than I'd ever expect for something that's actually quite simple and easy to do, particularly when compared to no line colouring, for example. So I'm going to show you how I did it. I'm creating both a mini slimline card and a standard A2 size card. Now the first thing you want to do is grab some coloured cardstock. That's the first trick. We're not going to ink blend our entire panel. We're going to grab some coloured cardstock a little bit lighter than what you actually want the overall card to be right at the end when you're done. So I've picked this sort of pale hot pink, if that's a real colour, and a teal card. And I'm first off going to heat emboss my African daisy. So I'm going to be repeat stamping this with embossing ink 2 or 3 times, so 3 times on this first A2 size panel that I have here. I'm using my MISTI just to make sure that I get the right position and to hold it in place. I haven't actually cleaned off my stamp in between stamping, so you'll see on the second and third stamping, I'm quite careful here how I place that stamp down, just so that I don't get embossing ink where I don't want it. If you're not quite as careful or you don't want to risk it, I do recommend wiping off your stamp in between each stamping. I have also treated my panel of cardstock with a lot of powder from my powder tool, just to make sure that I don't get any stray bits of embossing powder sticking where I don't want them. Now on this first panel, I'm using rose gold embossing powder, and I'm going to heat emboss this image 3 times. You'll see those first two times they sort of interlocked really well together, and then I'm just going to add a little bit of floral in that bottom corner. I'm not going to fill up the top part of the card because that's where I'm going to put my sentiment. I want to keep this as a 1-layer card. You could of course cover the entire panel with heat embossing if you wanted to and create an entire background, but I'm just leaving a little bit open for my sentiment. Now on my mini slimline, which is 3 inches by 6.5 inches, this is teal cardstock. I'm going to just stamp this twice up the edge. So I'm just going to have the focus area being on the edge of my card panel here, and I'm using the antique silver embossing powder. I thought that would pair really nicely with this teal colour, and look at that shine you get. It's just gorgeous, and I love that magic as the heat embossing melts, don't you? I know everyone says that, but it is true, especially when you speed it up this fast. We're going to use 2 different colours of ink for our ink blending on each card today. The first ink colour should be somewhat similar to the colour of your coloured cardstock. It doesn't have to be exact, and it should certainly be darker. So I've picked this Cosmic Berry. It's like a plummy purple colour. It's a little different to the hot pink. It is darker, but it'll show up really nicely on that coloured cardstock. Even though this is a dye ink, which is translucent, it'll darken the edges, and I'm just going to use a large ink blending tool and go round those edges into the centre and fading in towards the centre, but leaving a good portion of it not with any ink on it. So I haven't ink blended over the entire panel, and you'll see that it already is getting that nice halo effect. Now to add the extra drama, I like to go in with some jet black ink with a smaller ink blending tool just around the edges, not going in as far as I did with the Cosmic Berry. And I wish I could ink blend this fast, seriously. I'm just going in round the edges, and I will come back in with that large ink blending tool just to very so slightly blend together the jet black. Why do I keep calling it jet black? Jet black and the Cosmic Berry. So you'll see that you get this nice blend and that really nice sort of dark vignette look. Now for my second card, obviously I have the teal cardstock. I've chosen Emerald crisp dye ink, and I'm just going to do the exact same thing again. Go around the edges. You'll see that I go in a lot more on that sort of center right hand side. I'm going right up to the edges almost of those flowers with my emerald ink. I am leaving some of the paler sort of cardstock without any ink on it in the centers of where the flowers are, because at this point I wasn't sure if I was actually going to trim around the flowers. I thought that might have looked nice, but in the end I decided not to, and I've come back in with the jet black ink again, going right round the outside edge, but not quite as far in as that emerald ink, just to add that dark vignette, and you can see it's already looking pretty cool. Now you can wipe off the embossing powder with a cloth, and I do recommend you do, so you don't have any laying on top, because that embossing, that melted embossing, will resist the ink. That's why we can see those flowers showing through, but you also want to make sure you've wiped off any ink with a dry cloth. Now, as I said, I've left that top part free so I could stamp my sentiment. I've got very inky fingers from all that ink blending. I'm using Obsidian pigment ink. This is a pigment black ink. It's one of the best inks. I use it all the time for sentiment stamping. It's very detailed. And I'm going to stamp You're the Cutest, which is sentiments from the Paint a Flower African Daisy, directly onto the top. And I wasn't sure which sentiments I was going to use, but these ones nestled in between those daisies perfectly. So they're the ones I used. On my mini slimline, I'm going to step it up a bit. So I like to do this as well, as add lots of splatters, particularly if you're sort of thinking about a night sky or a space scene where you're bringing in that bold edging. I like to come in with some iridescent shimmer spray, and then also some of the white, pure white ink spray as well, and just splatter it on quite liberally all around. And I do get a big blob down at the bottom, but that's okay. I can dab that up and hide it with a sequin. It's okay. I actually do that. And then you can't see it just off camera, I'm also spritzing some water, and it will very gently sort of distress that ink, and you'll see some watermarks in the final card. I did want to go back and step up my paint card, so I added some antique gold splatters as well, very gently, but normally I would recommend doing that before you add the sentiment. To finish, I'm just going to add some gold sequins. Here and there, I'm just using these smaller sequins from this fantastic little cute bottle that Altenew carries in and around those splatters. And I've backed it onto a white note card made from 110 pound cardstock to finish. For my sentiment on my teal card, I've actually grabbed last month's Paint a Flower because I like the stocky sentiment rather than using a sentiment from the Paint a Flower African Daisy. That way I didn't have to fussy cut out around the scripty sentiment. This one was much easier to just trim out, and I'm going to heat emboss it in pure white on jet black cardstock and then trim it out. And I'll just pop that up using some Altenew foam tape right into the center of that card panel. And then to finish, I'm going to add some more sequins. This time I'm going to use the satin white sequins that also come in that super cute little bottle. I just love them. They're great for photos as well, you might have noticed. And that finishes both of my cards, showing you how to add drama with a bit of heat embossing and a bit of ink blending using the Paint a Flower African Daisy.
Altenew's artist markers are great for easy and beautiful coloring. In this case, Earm will teach you how to color in daisies with artist markers and level them up further with heat embossing.
Today I wanted to share with you this card that a lot of people wanted me to do a tutorial for. So here I am sharing this monochromatic card with heat embossing and artist marker coloring. It looks super gorgeous after you are done with it. For this project, I'll be using the Spring Daisy stamp set. And I'll be using frosty pink cardstock, stamping the images in Coral Bliss dye ink. Now you can use any pink ink that you want, or any color ink that you want that will not show through the embossing. Make sure to leave the stamp images in the stamp positioner because we are going to be stamping over this again with the clear embossing ink. Next, I am going to color the images with artist marker, starting with Coral Berry. I'm going to add the Coral Berry pigment next to the flower center and where my shadows are. This is the pigment that will show depth after you are done adding the heat embossing. So you don't need a lot of detail there, but just a dark pigment to show through after heat embossing. So this pigment needs to be added quite a lot so that it is visible later on. The next color to go on there is Peach Perfect. I know this doesn't go with the pink, but I love to add Peach Perfect with this pink. This does it adds a little bit of interest and takes away from the pinkiness of the flower. It adds a yellow tone to the flower. By adding Peach Perfect, the flowers stand out a bit from the background. The last color to go on there is Frosty Pink, which essentially is used to blend the Peach Perfect and the Coral Berry. I'm going to color all the petals in the same manner, just making sure that I add a lot of Coral Berry on there so that the darker portions are more visible. If I notice that the Coral Berry pigment is not as prominent, then I'll go back in and add more Coral Berry pigment. And it doesn't matter that if the Coral Berry pigment is not well blended. As long as it's there and it's visible, then we can have the sense of depth there after the heat embossing. For the flower center, I'm going to use a bunch of browns, and I will start by adding a light color to the flower center, then add darker tones by adding them as stippling. You will not notice this later on once you add heat embossing, so you don't have to worry too much about blending. Once this is done, I am going to put this image back into the stamp platform and stamp the image again, this time in embossing ink. But before doing that, make sure your image is completely dry and treat the paper with anti-static powder. Stamp the image in embossing ink and then pour over Peach Perfect embossing powder and heat set it. For my leaves, I'll use the same pink cardstock, the Frosty Pink. I'll stamp in Coral Bliss dye ink and use the Coffee Break set of artist markers from dark to light to color the leaves. It's not something very detailed. I'll just add dark pigment in the center and then blend it out with the lighter markers. Next, on a Crayola white cardstock, I will use cotton candy dye ink and a large blending tool. And then I will just start ink blending from one edge from the lower left corner and start blending towards the top right corner. This is something I wanted to do because my arrangement is going to be on the bottom left portion. So that's where my concentration of ink is going to be. And it's going to go softer as I move towards the top right portion. Next, I will add few fine black paint splatters. And I'll also add a few gold paint splatters. Then I'll add foam tape to my images and adhere them to the card front. And that's it, my card is done. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. I absolutely love this technique of combining artist marker with heat embossing and I love the results. I hope you liked it as well and would try it.
Jaycee is working with a beautiful daisy stamp set to create 3 different cards, each with different artistic style to help you make the most of your crafting supplies.
I'll focus on the stamp set for today's projects. For my first artistic style, I'll pair the Build-A-Flower cone flower with a similarly looking flower, Perfectly Perfect stamp set. The Perfectly Perfect stamp set doesn't have layering stamps, so it's awesome for coloring. My coloring medium I'll use for this card is watercolor, so I'll need watercolor paper. I love the A2 loose sheets because the paper die cuts really well and it is smooth in texture. I'll also use the silicone stamping mat as my palette for coloring. First things first, I'll stamp the outline images of both Build-A-Flower coneflower and Perfectly Perfect onto the watercolor paper. I'm using a water-soluble ink in a beige color. As I'm getting set up for watercoloring, I grabbed these watercolor brush marker refills or liquid watercolors. I ended up only using the Emerald, Espresso, and Jet Black liquid watercolors. Lagoon will come into play later. Then my brush of choice is the number 1 round brush from the round watercolor brush set. So those are my materials for watercoloring. Now, creative coloring is not my feature, that's Aram's specialty. I'm using the liquid watercolors to no outline color these flowers and foliage. The colors I'm using are espresso on the petals and emerald on the leaves, using a wet on wet technique to get beautifully blended layers. I'll speed this portion up and I'll see you at the end of the coloring process. Total coloring time for this piece was about 40 minutes. Earlier I mentioned using the Lagoon watercolor brush marker refill, but instead I decided to use the brush marker itself. What I'm going to do is outline and overcompensate the outer portion of the images. I like the synthetic bristles on the brush marker for this reason, because it comes to a really fine point, and I can get between the flower petals without losing definition. I'll skip forward to show you what I mean. I'm eliminating the white space around the images so that when I die cut them, the flowers will look truly creamy white on a dark background. And I overcompensated by about 1/4 of an inch just in case. For now, I'll set this aside to fully dry and work on the background to this card. I want an edge-to-edge watercolor background without a white margin. If I were to tape down the A2 watercolor cardstock, I would get a margin of white space where I masked off the paper. So I'm going to transition to the 9 by 12 inch watercolor paper and cut it into quarters for a final size of 4.5 by 6 inches. I taped a very thin margin around the paper to my silicone stamping mat. And I'll use the Lagoon liquid watercolor to make a very textured ombre with the highest color saturation at the bottom. I'll layer the Lagoon liquid watercolor with the flat watercolor brush included in the round brush set. I'm making sure to dry the watercolor panel between layers so that I get a true intensity of color in the final result. Finally, I'll add Lagoon splatters to finish off this watercolor background and set this aside to fully dry flat. Once dry, I'll use my jet black dye ink pad and my small ink blending tool to add a vignette around the background. Back over to my watercolor flowers, I'll use the coordinating dies to cut out the images. I glued down the watercolor background to my note card base, and then adhered my arranged flowers to my background. I finished this card with some gold pearl splatters from the 14 metallic watercolor pan set. I masked my sentiment area with my hand as I did this. Then finally, I glued down antique gold sequins. This first artistic iteration was inspired by the style of Tim Holtz, vintage, antique, distressed. What other words do you think would describe this card style? Let's move forward with this next card. Again, I'm trying out a different style for this second project. Here is the Build-A-Flower Coneflower. And this time I'm accompanying the Build-A-Flower with Sunflower Daisy stamp and die set. Again, I chose this set for the April 2021 Flower of the Month challenge. I want a no outline look again, but this time I wanted the coneflower images to match the Sunflower Daisy images. You'll notice there is no outline to the Sunflower Daisy stamp set, which gives these beautiful and almost digital print look to the images. I will use the outline to get started on Build-A-Flower Coneflower, but I'll stamp it in a light gray ink. I'm using Limestone Crisp dye ink to stamp the outline of the largest flower in Build-A-Flower Coneflower. Then I'm aligning the stamp layers according to the package instructions. To get clean impressions, I'm rubbing the Altenew Stamp Conditioning Eraser to dull the surface of the stamp. I'll go through the colors and layers quickly here. So I'm starting with D1 in Sunkissed, and I'll stamp that in full saturation. Then I'll diffuse an ink blend on the stamp on the D2 layer with Orange Cream. Then finally I'll use Fire Brick on the D3 layer. These colors are from the Warm and Cozy Mini Cube set. Moving on, I'll use Almond Butter on the E1 layer. Then Milk Chocolate on the E2 layer. Those colors come from the Delectable Delights Mini Cube set. Finally, to finish this flower, I'll use Dusk on the F1 layer. Then I was supposed to grab Desert Night on the F2 layer, but I grabbed Dusk again. I'll fix that later. Those colors are from the Cool Summer Nights family of inks. Okay, next flower, I'm going to neglect the capital A1 layer of Sunflower Daisy and start with the A2 layer. I'm stamping that in Vanilla Cream. The A3 layer in Hazelnut. Then finally the A4 layer in Almond Butter. For the center of the flower, I'll use the same almond butter color on the lowercase A1 layer. Milk chocolate on the A2 layer. Then finally jet black on the A3 layer. For the smaller leaf clusters, I stamped the solid images in Desert Night. Then I layered the capital C1 leaves using Ocean Waves. C2 in Dusk. Then C3 in Desert Night. I felt the E1 layer in the Build-A-Flower Cone Flower needed a little bit more definition, so I added a shadow of jet black just on the bottom of the image. After layering and stamping all the images, I die cut them using the coordinating dies. Then I made a draft arrangement on my craft mat. I love this tiny bouquet and the color impact of the composition. To start the assembly of this card, I used the Fine Frames rectangle die to obtain this thin black frame. I adhered this directly to a white cardstock panel as close to the center as I could. I went ahead and added my sentiment to this card. I used part of a sentiment in the Sunflower Daisy stamp set. I used washi tape to mask off the sentiment that I didn't want. Inked up the sentiment I wanted. Removed the washi tape. Then stamped the sentiment. I really like the minimal freshness and light sentiment. Then using my favorite Glad press and seal, I adhered my entire bouquet at one time to the center of my note card front. The style of this card might not be so obvious, but to oppose the previous jewel-toned card, I brought this one to more modern times. I thought the simplicity of this arrangement had a more graphic art feel, something that could look printed or mass-produced, but it is truly one of a kind and handmade. For my final project, I'm going with a style that isn't covered too often, but a type of card that I'm often asked to make, cryptic, right? The stamp set I'm pairing for this project with Build-A-Flower Cone Flower is Retro Plantains, something a little different. In principle, this one is going to be easy to work up, but the inspiration for this card is quite unique, which lends itself to the style I was looking for. I'm going to stamp all the images on my favorite spicy yogurt cardstock. I finally replenished my stash recently. I'll stamp the outline images and a few of the detail layers from Coneflower in Mahogany Bark. Then I'll stamp a few of the images from Retro Plantains stamp set. I'll do what I've been doing these last two cards and die cut all the images. I already have a rough arrangement planned here. But in true crafty fashion, things are bound to change. I picked everything up with Glad press and seal and opted for this orientation of the arrangement instead. I glued the entire arrangement at the same time to my background cardstock. It's another panel of spicy yogurt cardstock. Then finally, I finished this card with a partial sentiment like the previous card. I masked off the hello portion of the sentiment in retro plantains and left it as awesomeness. This card style was inspired by the color palette of Mendi or henna, but the single-tone minimal cluster of flowers is meant to represent a fabric print that I might find on a men's shirt. Yep, florals can be for guys too. It's just a matter of figuring out how to compose your art. I thought the mix of visual textures such as the spotty details and bold lines were more cognizant of tropical dress shirts. And then instead of a pretty and soft bouquet, I thought this more cradled and semicircular look to the flowers was more visually interesting. So what do you think? Do you all agree with the three visual styles I was trying to evoke with Build a Flower Coneflower?
Without a doubt, one-layer cards are simple, but also have the potential to be incredibly stunning. Aram's making a one-layer card featuring daisies and geometric elements.
I'll start by stamping on craft cardstock in Obsidian pigment ink. The stamp I'm using is the Spring Daisy stamp set. I will stamp the image a couple of times to get a really bold black outline. Then I will mask it. The mask is made out of copy paper and I use glue tape to secure it. For the first time in my life, I actually did try to make a sample card before creating this one, hence the stenciling on the masks. Now I've made this a circular mask. I've made two actually of different sizes. I'll place this one over my arrangement with just a small portion of circle peeking from behind. Then I'll place the broken chevron stencil over it, lining it with the edge of the cardstock to get the pattern straight. And through the stencil, I'll apply jet black mixed media ink. This covers my two geometric elements, the circular shape and the chevron pattern. I'll repeat this on the other side as well, using a smaller circle stencil or mask and again aligning the edge of the stencil with that of the panel. The jet black mixed media ink is perfect for this if you really want stark black inking. I'm actually inspired by the monochrome black outline geometric floral tattoos, and you will see how I add more of it in a bit. I'll add black paint splatters after heat setting the mixed media ink to make it permanent. Now I'll use the 005 fine liner pen from the fine liner pen set and add detailing to the petals, mimicking the tattoo designs. This is super easy, everyone, especially if you struggle with coloring. Just look at the definition I already have achieved with these. I will leave the leaves as is so the flowers stand out. Now to add that 4 dimension, I'll take a graphite pencil and add shadow. I will add these in places I think that are against light. Then I will use a blending stump to blend it out a bit. I will also add a bit of shadow to my circles. Once I was done, I felt the need to add for darker shadows, so I used the black Prismacolor pencil and just went over the outline where the shadows were. Next, I stamped the sentiment in Obsidian ink. The 2 circles and 2 flowers were bothering me. I thought I could add 1 more circle, but it had to be smaller than the 2 and it just would not look great for 2 reasons. First, I would have to add it with the circle at the bottom, and that would make the circles in a descending order. And secondly, I wouldn't be able to fit the pattern in the smaller circle. So this is what I'm doing. My third geometrical element is lines. You have watched me add these countless times on my cards, so you know the drill. I draw lines of various thickness and then fill them up with jet black alcohol marker. Then I made sure to add more depth around the circular pattern so it looks like the lines are behind the floral design and circular shapes. And I'm done. Just added a few black crystals and my 1-layer card is ready. I had fun making this one.
Calling all scrapbooking lovers, Natalie is here to help you create a memory-keeping layout with some cute daisy dies and coloring techniques to make your details pop.
Hi there, and today I want to show you how I'm going to transform plain watercolor paper, and I'm going to use the watercolor paper from Altenew. I'm going to use a few of the dies. I'm going to use actually the Craft a Die Daisy and the new watercolor brush markers, the Autumn Festival, to transform a page for my scrapbook albums. So I'm going to start by using the 9x12 paper pad. This is the watercolor paper pad from Altenew to actually cut the shapes for my flowers. You could do it two ways. You can actually add the watercolor to them, but I want to use different colors. I want to make them each unique. So all I'm doing is using my mini die cut machine to cut all the pieces that I need. And the Craft a Flower Daisy is a super fun die and it's very easy to work with. So you're going to see that I've already cut, I'm going to say around 7 or 8 florals, and I'm going to start coloring. So I'm going to use for this the watercolor brush marker. This is the new set, the Autumn Festival. And I'm starting by combining orange cream and mango smoothie, which are the two colors of the ink that I'm using, in this case, or the watercolor, to color the bottom outline of the flower. It has to be darker. That's just going to help you to add dimension and depth to the flower. So I'm going to use a little bit extra, in this case, orange cream. I just want to get that orange tone, and I'm going to mix it with some of the mango smoothie to just color the entire shape. And you saw that I added a little bit of water to the entire die cut at the beginning. That's just going to help me with kind of fusing the colors together. And once I add the color, you're going to see that I'm actually going to add the color on top of it. And that's one of the reasons why I wetted the die cut, so that the watercolor would just spread nicely on the paper. Now that I'm happy with what it looks like, I'm actually going to put it on the side to continue drying. And all of the leftover watercolor that I have there, I'm going to actually use it, but I'm going to add a little bit extra water. I just want to dilute the color to add a coat of painting to the second part of the die, which is the center part, the one that details the petals. So you're going to see that I'm just taking my time. I'm going to add, in this case, a little bit extra of the mango smoothie. I want to make it a little bit more on the yellow side, and I'm going to lighten it up. And by that, I'm actually going to add extra water onto the watercolor just to make it softer. Once I have that in place, I'm going to continue working on the florals. I colored 3 orange, and then I colored the other 2 of them. I use a combination of mango smoothie and yellow ochre. I want a more of a yellowish tone. And for the third one, I actually use tree bark and ultraviolet. So I'm just going to put some music and come back when I'm done. Hello once again, and I'm done coloring my flowers. Also, outside of the camera, I actually use the loose sheet of watercolor paper from Altenew. These are the small size, to add some of the green tones from the Fall Festival watercolor brush marker set, just to bring some of the green tones that I'm gonna need. Now what I want to create is what is going to become the background for my page, and I wanted something that's a little bit on the rustic side, something that's going to show a way to tie summer and fall, and I'll talk about more where the idea came from. And I'm using the new burlap die. This is one from Altenew from the August release, and I have this piece of craft paper that from a project that never got used. So all I'm going to do is try to create I'm going to say 2 connecting pieces of the burlap die cut in one single shot. So for that, I'm actually going to make sure that when I cut the pieces, I leave some of the parts of the die cut outside of the cutting plate, and I'm just going to create a way to join the pieces together. And you're gonna see that I created quite a few, created around 3 or 4 pieces, and I'm okay if they have jagged edges or everything is not cut. A lot of it's gonna be hidden, but it's also gonna add to the texture of my page, and I'm gonna show you in a bit. But before I do that, I need to build the florals now that they're dry. And it's super simple to build the florals from the Daisy, the Craft a Flower Daisy, sorry. The outline die cut of the flower has a big divot or a big V in the center in the flower between 2 petals. And that's your marking point for where the second part or the detail part of the flower is going to sit. So it makes it really easy to build. And then to build the centers, I just use the green tones with a little bit of tree bark from the same watercolor brush marker set, just to cut them. And I didn't want to show you all of that because it's going to take you a lot of time to show you every single part of it, but I'm sure I'm going to try to link the process video in the blog post so you can see how the flower is easily built. So now that I created all my florals, I'm going to set it. I have pretty much everything ready to set up this layout. It's all about putting it together. So I'm using actually cardstock that is not white. This is vanilla cardstock, and I'm going to add a little bit of color to the background. So I'm using Forest Glades mixed media ink for that in my ink blending tool. And all that I'm doing is I'm going to use my ink blending tool. Think of it as I'm using it as a stamp just to collect some of the ink, and then I'm going to go on a circular motion on top of my cardstock, and I'm choosing to create a large area of this ink blending on the top left side of my cardstock and also on the bottom right corner. So you're going to see kind of a diagonal design. And it's because I'm going to bring this picture. The big kids there, the teenagers are my kids, and the little ones are my niece and nephew, are littles. And this is the last picture of summer. I'm going to say maybe 3 years ago, 2016, sorry, 4 years ago. And there's a 10-year gap between them. So, but I always like taking the pictures when they're walking away from me, because there's a way to keep, like my kids are not going to grow anymore, so there's a way to keep track of how much they're growing through the times. So I wanted to use, the burlap, and that's kind of the mixture between the forest green color of the forest glade, very summery, very springy, but then you have the burlap and the colors of the flowers, very autumn. So there's that change, between summer and fall. That's why I chose the colors, because it just really represents this picture. So all I'm doing right now is all those pieces of burlap that I had cut with the die cut, I'm just going to create a background. And that's what I said, I didn't mind and they were messy, because a lot of it's going to be hidden. You're just going to see the edges popping. And I'm going to glue them onto the page. And you saw how I did it. I just put them in place and added double-sided tape on top of it, because I know my picture is going to sit on top of it. So that way I'm keeping the burlap pieces in place. And all I'm doing right now is just bringing the florals on top of it. I'm going to add a little bit of foam adhesive underneath them just to give them some movement. And then I'm bringing all the leaves and the branches that I created with the leaf mix die set. Again, one of the new dies from Altenew. That's just going to bring a little bit of movement and a little bit of that, I don't know how you talk, the little movement, the little whimsy to the layout. The Craft a Flower Daisy actually comes with leaves, but I wanted something a little bit more, I'm going to say fun. Just to bring, like I said, that transition between summer and fall, and the fact that I have teenagers and little ones are little. So I just wanted something that mixed all of that together. So now that I have my page set up, it's just about adding a few extra details. I'm bringing the Enjoy the Ride collection, and I'm actually going to use one of the chipboards that reads memories, and then the alphas from this collection are beautiful. This tone of purple, and I thought that was just going to be great with the color that I have chosen in the background. So I'm just adding the word summer memories, and then you saw that I add a puffy heart for my stash, and all I'm going to do is actually add my lines of journal using a maroon gold pen. So this pen just looks like it's going on purple, but it has a gold tinge to them. So I'm going to bring a little bit of the antique gold metallic spray from Altenew just to add a few sprinkles of it throughout the page, and that's about it. I love how this turned out. I love having the chance to transform a layout or any memory into a keepsake, and even better when you can do it just using a plain piece of white cardstock and all the Altenew products. And I love how this turned out.
Sure, using one flower in your project is great, but adding multiple to create a fun bouquet is even better. Try Jaycee's tutorial featuring daisies, stargazers, and more here.
So first, let me tell you where I got the inspiration for this video. I was out grocery shopping for the holidays, and I passed this arrangement of flowers over in the florist section of the store. I didn't pay any mind to it until suddenly I realized I have all of these flowers in Altenew stamps. Which stamps am I thinking of? Well, let me show you. The first stamp set that came to mind was Altenew's Build a Flower Stargazer, new for December 2019. If you've never heard of the Build a Flower subscription, it is an exciting gift you give yourself every first of the month with a fabulous layering floral set. I've got the service link below. Also featured in the bouquet is Sunflower Daisy stamp and die set. Now this one was new for 2019, but bonus, here's the older set Poinsettia and Pine from 2015. This is a 4x6 stamp set with beautiful bold outline images, perfect for your holiday stash. One of the techniques I wanted to show you all is how to get beautiful white flowers using Altenew Layering Crisp dye inks. Here I'm showing you the 3 cardstocks I'm using to achieve this white flower look, and I'm trying to get something somewhat identical to the inspiration image. I have a cream colored cardstock. I think I got this from a variety pack at a big box store. A bright white cardstock, and Altenew's wood grain white cardstock. I'm using the first 2 cardstocks for the flowers, of course, but the wood grain cardstock is important for these cards to help distinguish the texture of the white flowers and the white background. In other words, I'm using the wood grain white cardstock to help the white flowers stand out from the background. I'm going to stamp the Altenew Build a Flower Stargazer flower first. To summarize, I am stamping the layers of the flower following the layering guide. However, I'm omitting the base layer or the layer that contains more surface area simply because I want the color of the cardstock to do the work for me. In this case, it's the cream colored cardstock. After studying the inspiration image, I found that the lily in the bouquet was a cream color with hints of green and creamy sandy shadows. So the first ink I'm going to grab is Vanilla Cream from Delectable Delights ink set. To help diffuse and mute the ink a little bit and reinforce the white flower feel, I'm grabbing one of these ink blending sponges. I'm going to apply a small bit of ink in the center of the stamp, and then using the ink blending sponge, I'm going to dab and diffuse the ink toward the outside of the petal. I'm just using the white cardstock just so you all can see. Once I feel confident that I've blended the ink without any harsh edges, I'll swing the door of my Mini Misty over and stamp the image. If I feel like adding more color, I can certainly do that by repeating the inking and dabbing process until I achieve a desired saturation. But in the end, I want a beautifully diffused look to these flowers with a little depth in the center, just like you're actually looking into the center of a flower. Now, I like making multiple cards at once. You've got all the materials out to make a card, so why not make more than one, you know? Okay, so now in my Mini Misty, I have the third most detailed layer of the petals. Like I said earlier, I noticed a bit of green in the petals from the inspiration image. So now I'm grabbing Bamboo from the Tropical Forest family of inks and essentially doing the same thing as before. I'm inking and dabbing the dye ink in layers until I obtain the saturation I'm looking for. To finish this flower, I'm leaving the filaments of the stamens unstamped, but I will stamp the anther and freckles of the stargazer using Hazelnut from the Delectable Delights family of inks. And there you go, here are my 4 Build-A-Flower stargazers. Moving on to the Sunflower Daisy stamp set, nearly everything is the same as before, just with a different ink family of course. Obviously we can't stamp white onto white cardstock, so then we have to color the image using the shadow layers. The Sunflower Daisy stamp set is one of my favorites for ultra-dimensional flowers. Again, I'm omitting the base layer of the flowers A1 and B1, and I'll skip right to A2 and B2. I'm going to use the warm gray family of inks from Altenew to achieve these lifelike shadows with the help of an ink blending sponge as before. To reiterate, I'm applying a small amount of ink in the center of the flower stamp. Then I'll use the ink blending sponge to pounce on top of the stamp and ink to help diffuse the color towards the end of the petals. I'll add this color in layers to help give a soft gradient to the flowers. Since the smaller flower only has 2 layers, I faked dimension by stamping and diffusing the B2 layer in Morning Frost, but then I used Evening Gray and repeated the diffusing process, but I didn't take the ink as far as Morning Frost, giving a small dark halo in the center of the flower. This is why I like the mini ink cubes over the ovals, because I get to make these detailed stamped images. But that's certainly my preference. For the center of the flowers, I grabbed the Summer Afternoon family of inks and stamped those layers following the layering guide. It was a beautifully sunny day in my craft room, so the flowers don't look like much on camera, but believe me, they are there. Now here are my flower panels. I'll set these aside and work on the next element in my card. For the final stamp set, Altenew's Poinsettia and Pine, I'm using the pine cone image and simply heat embossing on gray cardstock using a metallic silver embossing powder. I don't have the antique silver crisp embossing powder, but I'll link to it below. The foliage in the original inspiration image contained a coniferous type juniper bundle, so the Altenew Poinsettia and Pine set is perfect for adding some greenery as well. To keep things coordinated, I'll use olive and moss from the Tropical Forest family of inks from earlier and create a simple stamped gradient using the ink blending sponge. I have olive toward the tips of the needles and moss towards the branch. Okay, just to recap, I have the Build-A-Flower Stargazer, Sunflower Daisy, Poinsettia and Pine Cone, and conifer foliage. Now, I'm a bit of a perfectionist, so if I spend all that time stamping all these images, I want a beautifully placed margin all around the stamp when I die cut it. But with the pale colors, I'm sure if you're recreating this project, it might be difficult to see where to place the die to get a perfect cut from the Mini Blossom die cutting machine. So my tip is to grab a scrap piece of typing paper and die cut the flowers. I'm not concerned about the positive pieces here. I'm using the negative piece to create a frame around the stamped flower to see where my die should go. So I'm moving and framing the stamped image within the positive space of the frame. You'll know when it's lined up correctly by an even margin around the detail layers. I'll tape this frame down temporarily with some washi tape so that it doesn't move. Then I'll simply take the coordinating die for this image and align the die to the space. You'll be able to feel the die sort of lock into place when you have the die oriented correctly. Now before you take this to your die cutting machine, you can always check at this point to make sure the die placement makes sense. I'll repeat this for the larger flower. I'm aligning the negative frame to the stamped image and taping it down. Then I'll grab the coordinating die and lock it into the positive space and tape it down again. Then I'll take this entire panel to my die cutting machine and there you go, perfect die cuts. Now I'll simply cut out all my images and get them ready for arranging. I've already got my wood grain white cardstock adhered to some card bases. There are enough flowers stamped and die cut to make 4 cards, so that's why I have so many bouquet elements, just to give you all many ideas on how to arrange these images. I love an aesthetically pleasing arrangement, and I'll spend quite a long time making sure these images lay exactly how I want. I'm looking for an overall triangular shape to the flowers and a complementary triangular shape to the foliage. Odd numbers also create visual interest and tension, making your recipient's eyes wander to the 3 implied points of the triangle. So that's what I strive for in these floral arrangements, and I'll follow that method for the rest of the images and card bases. To help the white flowers stand out a little bit more from the white background, I have a piece of cream-colored tissue paper here. I'll use the largest circle from the half-tone circles nesting die set to cut out 4 circles. one for each card base. I'll use these circles as a spotlight behind the white flowers. I won't make the tissue paper too obvious, so it won't peek out too far from underneath the white flowers of the arrangement. I've used a piece of Glad press and seal to pick up the entire arrangement and apply glue to the back of the die cuts before pressing down the tissue paper to the back. I may also add foam squares to the back of one of the foreground flowers just for some added dimension. Okay, fabulous. So here are my 4 floral arrangements. The tissue paper is not permanently glued down yet because I still need to add my sentiment. I thought the sentiments from the Sunflower Daisy stamp set were perfect for the new year, and I decided to white heat emboss the sentiment onto gray cardstock because I felt that the metallic pine cone was a little too evident on the arrangement. So the gray cardstock will help balance out the solid gray pine cone. I cut the sentiments into banners and arranged them in a way so that they don't cover too much of the flowers in the arrangement. Lastly, I added a few gunmetal sequins to also help balance out the gray and the bit of shine from the silver embossing before permanently adhering the arrangement to my card base.
Ashley is taking you through a quick, easy, and gorgeous project tutorial featuring some Altenew Daisy stamps and will teach you how to pair them with other elements to make a cohesive card.
The products I'll be using today are Sunflower Daisy stamp and die set, the Leaf Clusters stamp set, and then the Mega Alphabet H die. You can use whichever stamps and dies you like. I'm just going to be using these ones for my example today. I'm going to take out the pamphlet here because I really am in love with these trifold pamphlets. They give so much inspiration, and I wanted to take a lot of color inspiration from this card here. So I'm going to use some of the inks that I have. I don't have Warm Sunshine, which is normally the center color, but I'm going to substitute it with Maple Yellow. I'm also going to be using the Orange Cream and Fire Brick colors for my orange smaller daisy. For my layered stamping, I'm going to be using my Mini Misty. Using a stamp positioning tool is imperative to getting a perfect layered stamp image at the end. Now, you don't always have to use one, but for these larger images like these flowers or this one specific flower in the set, I would highly recommend it. It's really helpful to be able to line it up and then close the door in the stamp positioner to make sure that it doesn't move. So in succession, my colors today are Buttercream, Maple Yellow, Caramel Toffee, and Mocha. And then for that second smaller flower, again, it's Orange Cream and Fire Brick. For the base layer stamp, or the first layer, I'm going to be using my lightest color and then going up each color in succession and each layer that I go. I know a lot of you are probably saying I already know that, but since this is my first video, I thought I'd go into everything in detail. I would love for you to tell me in the comments what you'd like to see more of or what you don't need to hear so much of, and I would really appreciate that. So now with my second stamp, you can see on each layer, I'm going in and just lining it up. With these stamps, they have the center removed because there are separate stamps for the center of the flower, and that actually makes these stamps extremely easy to line up. Anytime you have a flower, floral image like that that's layered and it doesn't have the center, it's going to be really easy to line up because you can just line up the center on each stamp. They're all going to be the same size because the center isn't getting larger or smaller for the petals itself. So that's always a really good giveaway that it's going to be very simple to layer. So the smaller orange flower only has 2 layers, so I'm just going to continue on with my larger yellow flower, and you'll see here that it takes me a little while to line this up. I wanted to show you that even when it's simple, and even somebody that does a lot of layered stamping like myself, I don't rush my layering. It doesn't just take a second. Sometimes it takes me a minute to just sort of line it up and get it right. Also, you'll see that I transition into an orangey brown color. This is great for a couple reasons. One, it's really hard to just decide that you're going to go for a really bold color, but also this is what the pamphlet is great for. It'll show you what looks great before you have to dive into it and try it yourself and waste all of that time stamping. Now I'm going to go in for the center of the flowers, and I'm using Rocky Shore, Mocha, and Espresso. These colors were all suggested in the pamphlet, so I figured I should use them. I'm going to go ahead again with my lightest color on the first or the base layer, the first layer stamp, and then go up again from there. I really love the center of these flowers because they give a lot of dimension, and these flowers end up looking so realistic at the end. That's one of the reasons that I love layered stamping so much, is because if you're not a colorist or somebody that is extremely well versed in coloring, you can still make these beautiful images with lots of dimension and highlights and shading without having to be an expert in coloring. So here are the finished images, and in just a minute you'll see, or just here, I've done some of the leaves as well. Only one of the leaves in the set is layered and the rest are just one layer. I've gone ahead and cut that Mega Alphabet H die out from craft cardstock, and as you could see in the beginning, we're just going in for a really nice fall theme. I'm going to take the leaf clusters stamp now and set it to the side because I'll be using that to stamp directly onto my card front. As you can see, I'm just placing the die cuts around. I want them to look like they're intertwining in and out of the H. You can use any letter, like I said, you could use any stamp or die, but I like the H because it can stand for happy birthday or hello or somebody's name. So the H and the T, you could use thank you and thankful. Those are two of my go-tos. So I'm just taking all of these die cuts and placing them where I think I may like them. I can always move them around, of course, because they're not adhered right now. But once I get them where I like them, I'm going to use press and seal just to make sure that I can keep all of them in place and I don't lose my spot. Meaning I don't have to take all of these off and sort of remember where I like it or take a picture with my phone. I can have it exactly where I liked it before by using the press and seal. They do have a clear option, but when I went to the store, they only had these polka dots, so I thought, well, that's okay. It's really nice too because once you stamp to do a base layer on your card front, like I'm going to do now, you can place it back over just to see if you need some more stamps or some splatter like I'm going to do. So it's nice to be able to hold it over just to be able to see what it will look like once it's done. I'm using my original size Misty here because I want this fairly large leaf cluster stamp to come off of the cardstock and sort of look like it's growing up and off of the cardstock. So to do that, I need a lot more space for the stamp to hang off. I'm stamping this first one in Rocky Shore, which is the lightest brown color that we used earlier for the center of the flowers, and I'm stamping this on the top left-hand corner of this card front. I'm going to take that same stamp and rotate my Misty because I'm going to hang it off now from the bottom right-hand side. I get questions sometimes on people asking if they need the original size Misty or if the mini Misty is okay. And what I always say is it really depends, but it's really nice to have the original size Misty for things like this. This wouldn't work in the mini Misty because you wouldn't have that space to hang off the stamp like that. Using accent stamps like these leaves on directly onto the card front really allows for more interest and dimension into the design itself. And I'm feeling like I need something a little bit more. I want it to look a little bit more artsy, and my answer for that is always splatter, paint splatters. So what I'm going to do is put some of the same Rocky Shore ink right there on the white part of my glass mat. You can use a piece of acetate or a craft mat if you've got it. And I'm just going to add some splatter directly to the card front in that same Rocky Shore color. I know that sometimes people are a little afraid to add the splatter, but I have to tell you, I have never seen a splatter that I didn't like. I would say go for it because honestly, to do those two stamps over without the splatter is going to take no time at all. You're not going to ruin the main image of your card or anything like that. So I am using foam tape now on the back of our main image, which is that H die cut and the flowers and the green leaves. And you'll see that I actually take it off of the press and seal. And I do that because I just couldn't see exactly where I was lining it up. This was especially important because now that the H and the flowers are one cohesive image, they need to be centered on the card front as one image, rather than the H being centered and my flowers hanging way off to the left of the cardstock. As you can see, it looks like we have so many different dimensions here. It looks like there's lots of layers when really there's only 2, but because we did the intertwining and the stamping directly onto the cardstock, it really looks like there's a lot more going on.
Take a look at this tutorial where May combines some stamped daisy images with fun watercoloring to make a bold and bright handmade card.
Before I started, I want to share what I've tried out before. I usually test out a couple of designs before I make a video. This is cold pressed watercolor paper from Arches, and I'm trimming my watercolor paper using Timo's paper trimmer. I'm prepping my watercolor paper with anti-static powder to get the best result with heat embossing. I'm pulling out my stamps from the Spring Days stamp set, and I'll be stamping the images using my stamp press and Versamark watermark ink. My watermark ink pad is kind of inky from my other stamps stained with the colored inks. But no worries, it don't affect my heat embossing but help me see where I stamped before. After I'm done with my stamping, I'm gonna sprinkle some Ranger Superfine Gold Embossing Powder and tap off the excess. I'm also using my tweezer and small paint brushes to flick away any stray powder from sticking to unwanted areas. Then I will heat set my images with a heat tool until they are completely melted. I will taping down my watercolor paper on a chipboard sheet using painter's tape. This will prevent my paper from warping while watercoloring. It's now time for watercoloring. I'm gonna wet my paper first with water and then I will start bringing some color. I'll be using paper towel to remove the pigment between adding more colors. I'm also going to use my heat tool to let the paint dry before bringing more colors to the images. Now I'm going to turn on some music and speed up the painting process so you can watch me color. So I'm done with my watercoloring and I'll be die cutting my images with a Spring Days die set. I'm gonna pull out the dies from the set and secure them on my paper using washi tape. Then I'll be running them through my Cardboard die cutting machine. So here I have my die cut images and I'll plan out the layout of my card to see where I want to add my sentiment. By the way, I'm using wood grain white cardstock from Altenew for my card base. I'm gonna use the Halftone Smile stamp set for my sentiment and heat emboss the smile with gold embossing powder and die cut smile with Cardboard die cutting machine. Then I'll mount my flowers, leaves, and smile die cut word on the card front using foam tape. I wasn't sure which sentiment would go with smile die cut word, so I already heat embossed a few sentiments on different colored cardstock. I'm stamping my sentiment with watermark ink and heat embossing it with a Ranger Superfine Detail white embossing powder. I'm trimming off my sentiment banner using scissors and mount it on the top of the smile die-cut word using foam tape. Then I'm gonna mount my panel on an A2 size top folding card using double-sided tape. As you can see, I'm having a hard time arranging my flowers. My husband told me there were no big difference between this and that, but I had to keep trying until I was satisfied with the arrangement. To finish off my card, I'll be adding some clear drum list from Pretty Pink Patch on the card front.
Last but certainly not least, join Lydia in this tutorial where she plays with sunflower daisy stamps to create a monochromatic masterpiece.
So to start with, I'm going to be using the ever so pretty Sunflower Daisy stamp set, and you can just see how well these do layer up. I am going to create a lighter image just by missing out the first layer and just starting with the second one. So I'm starting with the second one here. I have missed the base layer out and I'm using some of the beautiful eastern sky to do this layer here. So I'm just going to stamp a couple of these again in like a triangle formula that I normally do. Odds is always a good one to start with. So that was the blue one, and for the green one I'm going to be using exactly the same stamp. So this is the second layer of that sunflower, and I'm going to be using some frayed leaf for this one. So because we've missed out that base layer, the flower is going to look really lighter because we do have that white showing as the base layer. So next up, so the second layer for this, which is the third layer, so because we've missed out the base one, I am going to be using the Forest Glades. So these are quite easy to layer up. I do manage to do it quite easily with my acrylic block, but if you are having trouble, we do have the layering guide on the back of the stamp set. Also, you could use a stamp positioning tool to help you layer these images as well, but I do find that you can do it with a block as well. So for the second layer of the blue flower, which is the third layer, remember we've missed out the base layer, I am using the Aquamarine. Again, I'm using my little acrylic block. I do find that I work quicker with my acrylic block for some reason, especially when doing backgrounds like this, so I don't have to keep moving the stamp off my stamp positioner to move it into a different place. I just move my block around and it lands where it wants to and makes a pretty pattern. So for the third layer, I'm going to be using the beautiful Azurite. So this is from the Lapis Lazuli set, if you do have this, and this is the darkest one in that set. So I'm just going to add in the really dark shadows with this beautiful dark blue colour. It's navy, but it's not quite that. I call this probably a royal blue, but it is very pretty. So once I have done that one, I'm going to move on to the green. Again, I'm using that same image stamp. So this is the fourth layer, which we're using for the third, and I'm going to be using the evergreen ink for this one. So again, I'm just going to pop this into place with my acrylic block. Again, if you are having trouble, please do check out our layering guide. Also use a stamp positioner if you're not that comfortable with it as well. So once I have these in place, I'm then going to take the mask stencil for this set, and I'm going to be using these to cover my images that I've already stamped in replace of a mask that I do make myself. So these ones are like pre-made masks. To stick these in place, I'm just going to use a little bit of Altenew tape pen, and as you can see, I took a little bit of the stick off with my finger. So I'm just going to do the same with the daisies. So these are only going to be one layer because we're missing out the first layer. So I'm just using the second detail layer for this. And for the blue card, I'm going to be using the Eastern Sky. So this is the one that we used for the lightest layer on the sunflower. We're also going to be using it for this one as well. So as you can see, before I do move the mask to a different flower, I do take a dry tissue just to wipe off any of that excess ink so I don't splodge it anywhere. It does help me stay a little bit cleaner than I normally would. So I do recommend taking just a dry tissue on that mask every time you do use it, just to get rid of the ink that's on there. So I do stamp around those sunflowers and do add a little couple more daisies around the edge. Once I've done that, again, I'm going to take a mask stencil. So this is the one for the daisy. You're just going to want to make sure which way it goes before you do stick it down with a little bit of repositionable adhesive. Once it's in place, I'm going to take some of those little leaf fronds from the Sunflower Daisy set, and I'm just going to stamp these in between the images. As you can see, I'm going to keep moving my little masks just to make sure that the images that I want to be covered are covered up, and I don't stamp over any of the images that I don't want to. I do stamp over a couple, but I'm not going to worry too much about that. So once I have done that with the beautiful aquamarine ink, I'm then going to move in with the Azurite. So this one is the darker one, and I've taken the little tiny little branch from the stamp set there just to fill in any more images spaces that I've got. I'm then going to move on to the centers of the flowers, and as with the flowers I missed out the base layer, I'm going to miss out the base layer with these centerpieces as well. So for this little centerpiece, so with the one for the sunflower, I have missed the first layer and I've used some Eastern Sky for the second layer, and I'm going to use aquamarine for the third layer. The little centers do line up really easily, and I do find that you don't have to layer these up as quite so much as the petals, I should say. So for the centers of the flowers, again I've missed out the first layer, and then I've stamped the second and third using the aquamarine and azurite inks. So as I did with the blue one, I'm going to do exactly the same with the green one. I'm just going to change up some of the leaves later on. So I'm adding the mask over the beautiful sunflower that we've already stamped, and I'm going to add some daisies in with my lightest green ink, which is the frayed leaf. As you can see, when I do move that mask around, I do clean the ink off with this one as well. So once I've done that, I'm going to add in some leaves, and with the flowers, because I missed it out that base image, I am going to miss out the base image with the leaves as well, just to give me some more of that white popping through the background. So for the leaves, I've missed out the base layer, and then I've done the second and the third layers using some of the forest glades for the second layer, and then the evergreen for the third. Sorry, my mind just missed it then. So again, I am moving the little masks around when I feel I need to. So I'm just cleaning them off, popping them into place, and then stamping my leaves into place again. So once I have finished all of these larger leaves, I'm going to go in as before, like I did with the other background, with some of the smaller branches, and I'm just going to use some forest glades for this. And then I'm going to pop in the centers. Again, I have missed out that base image for the centers. So for the centers of the sunflower, I've gone for the second and the third, and I've gone with the frayed leaf and the forest glades. And then for the centers of the daisies, again, I've missed out that base image, and then I've gone in with frayed forest glades, for the second layer, and then some of the evergreen for the third. For the sentiment strips, I'm using the new sentiment strips stamp set. I just love this. There is so many different sentiments on here for all different occasions, and I do feel that you can make batches of these when you need to. So to do this, I'm just going to be stamping this onto some black cardstock, and I'm just going to lay these into my little misty, and I'm going to align them up on the lines, on the grid lines that you do have them on there. And I'm just going to put lots and lots of these sentiments on there so I can stamp a lot of these at once, and then just cut strips of them when I need them. So again, I'm just going to be using these onto some black cardstock, a jet black cardstock, and because I'm embossing these, I've added a little bit of talcum powder just so the powder doesn't stick where I don't want it to. I've inked these up then using some of the embossing ink from Altenew, and I am going to be heat setting this using some pure white embossing powder. So once I've done that, you can see that we have that full piece there. So I can just cut these into strips and use them in whatever card I want to, or maybe chop them up so they're a little bit smaller, but I do like the strips of these. So once I have cut the strips of the sentiments that I do want to use, I've just added a little bit of foam tape behind them and then added them into place on my card base where I want them to be. So here are the cards complete. I just love how these look. It kind of looks like a piece of fabric, and I think it's very, very pretty.
Daisies are beautiful, versatile flowers that work for any occasion and are perfect for cards you're sending to your family and friends. It may not be the rarest or most intricate flower out there, but its beauty and meaning will certainly make it a staple in your craft room. We hope you have a chance to experiment with your daisy stamps, dies, stencil, and more to make something beautiful. Don't forget to share your creations with us too. Bye!
Loved watching this video. There is more where that came from here on the Altenew official YouTube channel. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that bell button so you don't miss out on any of the crafty fun. See you soon and happy crafting.